Hey guys. So a while back when GenerateBlocks introduced flex settings into the blocks. Hey guys. So a while back when flex was first introduced into GenerateBlocks, it really took me a while to adapt to it. Um, I feel like flex was not always like the standard method for building when it came to WordPress. So it wasn't something I was super familiar with. And as time went on, I understood it a little bit more, used it a little bit more, practiced with it more. And so today I just want to do a really brief, basic introduction into using Flex in Generate Blocks and how you can really take advantage of it. Okay, so I've got just a blank test page here. And first, I just want to tell you so the few areas that I feel like I've used Flex the most is number one in query loops. When I'm building out a query loop, pretty much 99% of the time now I'm using Flex because I'm aligning the items, stretching or like all those Flex settings that you can utilize comes so in handy when it comes to query loops. Of course, it depends what kind of query loop you're building out, but I'm talking more about like um, query loops for blog posts or anything similar to that, custom post types. And then additionally, when you're building out, say, like a card design, right? Flex really comes in handy in those situations. And anywhere else, any situation where you're needing to individually control the layout of your design in terms of like you need text on top and text on the bottom, or the button to always sit on the bottom and the text be at the top. Certain situations where maybe utilizing the traditional grid block within Generate Blocks, you have to utilize things like margin and padding in order to create those kind of separations, and it's just not consistent and really the proper way to do it. So definitely those are the best areas that I think I've taken advantage in using Flex. I already know and I could tell you for a fact I'm underutilizing Flex and I'm learning more and more each day of where I can use it, how to use it, and use it to my advantage. Okay, so let's go ahead and get to just kind of playing around here. So first and foremost, of course, I'm going to insert a container block. And now whether or not you insert an inner container can depend on a few things. With Flex, it doesn't necessarily matter. It's more so about whether you want your content to go full width, edge to edge of your browser, or if you want it to be contained in your site container width. So majority of the time I'm using an inner container. So I'm going to go ahead and insert an inner container. We'll open up this panel here so we can see. And so we've got our outer container, outermost container, and then our inner container here. And what you could do, let's say, so we'll create kind of a 3-column layout using Flex. So what happens is we need to add then 3 containers inside our inner container because we want those 3 to sit within our contained browser width, right? Not edge to edge. So inside this inner container, I'm going to add another container. So now you'll see nested again is another container. And we can go ahead and now hit duplicate and duplicate. So now I have my 3 containers inside my inner container. Now you'll see they are stacked on top of each other, but we want them to be side by side, right? So a left column, a middle column, and a right column. So if we select our inner container that holds those 3, and we're going to go to display, flex, now you're automatically going to see them shrink right up, against each other here and side by side, which is technically what we're going for. So, but what we need to do is adjust the width of those 3 inner containers in our flex box here to span the full width here evenly, right? Because we want them all to be the same width. So I've seen this done 2 ways, and I'll be honest out of the box, I do not know which is the preferred way. So the first one I'll tell you is if we go ahead and select all 3 of our inner containers here, our column containers, come to Flex Child and change grow to 1, that's automatically going to tell this to grow those 3 containers to the full width of the container they're within. So that is a method that works. However, the other method is if you turn grow back to 0 and you come down to sizing, we already know that because we want a 3-column width, essentially that's 33%, right? So we can say the width of each of these containers we want at 33%. And so if you do that math, of course, we're missing kind of a 1% gap there in which we could control some of that. So now that these are all 33% and they're side by side, we want some gap in between them, right? So if we come to the outer container that holds those and you come to column gap and we'll say 20 pixels, you see now there's spacing in between our column gap. So let's go ahead and let me add some color to these so we can kind of see them a little bit better. So we do that, and a black. Okay, so now you can see those 3 containers a little bit better. So you see the 3 gaps in between them, right? That's the column gap. So then the little bit tricky thing that you have to pay attention to is once we get into the mobile version, so responsively. So we can jump down to mobile and you'll see these 3 columns are maintaining their position side by side, right? They're going left to right. But on mobile, our content is not going to be that little, right? You're not going to be able to read the content, whatever it is we put in here. So what we need is them to stack top to bottom. So if we come back to the container that's holding those 3, right? Because we need to understand that this container is going to control how these are laid out and where they go. So come to that outer container that's holding them, and rather than direction row, we need to change to direction column. And so that's going to take them from going left to right to top to bottom in that column orientation. Okay, now, so we do see they're in the right position, but they're maintaining also, again, the same width that we dictated on desktop, which is 33%. But because we're on mobile, we want these to span 100%. So if we come select the 3 containers, come down to our sizing panel once again, and if we go ahead and insert 100, that will span our containers 100%. And lastly, because we see these are butted up against each other and we want some space in between those, we'll go back to our container that holds them and we'll add some row gap. So on desktop, because it was left to right, we can go back in a row format, right? So the container here, direction is row. We added column gap because it's in between the columns. However, on mobile, we are on column direction and we need gaps in between the rows. So that's where we add the row gap. So next, let's go ahead and do insert a little bit of copy on these containers so we can play with a little bit of the align items and justify content settings. So this first one, I'm going to go ahead and add a headline, and we'll call this, this is a headline. And then we're going to duplicate that and say, put in some there. We'll make this a paragraph. Make this a little bit smaller. Sheesh. Let's say 14 pixels. And lower this down about 10 pixels. And then this container, we want to add a little bit of padding around it. So we'll go ahead and sync up the padding and say 20 pixels. All right, so next what we want to do is we can play around with the flex settings on this container. So right now, this container itself is actually not set to flex. It's controlled by the outer container's flex. So in order to control the items within this container, we need to change this container display option to flex as well. Now, when you do that, automatically, the default option is set to flex direction row. However, we want our text to be on top of each other, top to bottom. So this needs to be column. So what we're going to do here is we're going to change one more thing on our container. And I'm going to say a min height of 400 pixels. This way our box is a little bit taller and we can see this content kind of move around. So I'm going to lower this just a little bit. All right. So if we come to our container, and once again, let's take a look at these align items. So if we go ahead and say left, obviously they're already aligned left. They're going to be there, centered, right. This content is not aligning with that. I'm not sure if that's just a GenerateBlocks glitch. Of course, these can be handled individually on their own. But at any rate, and then what we can do is justify the content, right? So if we want this content to sit at the bottom, then all we do is change justify content, flex end. And you can really lean on these little visual cues here to help you. So if you want it in the center of the box, if you want it at the top, if you want it at the bottom, you can kind of tell with these what it's going to do. And then of course you can also space it out evenly. So if we do that, it's going to take every element inside of it and space it out. So if we had 3 in here, let's go ahead and duplicate this one. Now they're going to be spaced out evenly in between each other. So it definitely comes in handy, especially if you want like a name up here and you want a button down here, right? It just kind of helps really with your layout and be more flexible, and no pun intended, right? Flex, layout, flexible. But it helps you really just create more creative layouts and control the content individually. So that's the justified content. We're going to let's leave that at the bottom. And then what you can also do is take a look at this on mobile. And we can control, so if we said we don't want this to be 400 pixels, we'll say 300 pixels. And actually on mobile, we want the content to be in the center. So then it'll center it in the box for mobile. And then if we came back to desktop, it's still at the bottom. So still have those responsive controls to really change the layout and the look and feel both on desktop and mobile. And of course tablet too. We don't want to forget about tablet. All right, the next thing we can take a look at and to really take notice of something that might be important when it comes to mobile layouts is, say for example, not that I'm recommending this necessarily, but if I want this headline to appear below the copy on mobile, so here it's on top, right? We jump down to mobile. It's still in that same format, but we say, hey, we want this one to be below this one on mobile. What you do is select that headline, come to Flex Child. In order, we'll say 2. So that's automatically going to jump it down below. And on this one, on this headline, we could say 1 just to say this one's first, this one's second, right? So use the numbering system in order of how you want it to appear. Then we can jump back to desktop and the headline's back on top. So something else we can take a look at is what you can do is there's really endless options of how many containers you can insert within a flex, right? Or really any container for that matter. But take this box, for example. Say I wanted to add a social icon next to the name. Well, normally in traditional GenerateBlocks before Flex was introduced, we had to use inline, right? So it would create you create 2 blocks and then do inline position and then kind of tweak it from there, which really wasn't friendly. But now we can utilize Flex. So if inside this container, we can actually go ahead and insert another container. So we'll insert 2 more containers. We'll duplicate that, and we're going to move this headline into the first container. And then this one, we're going to put a container within that as well. Oops. And we'll duplicate that. All right, so actually we'll delete this one. All right, so we've got our two containers inside another container. And now in this container, we want it to be side by side, right? So we're gonna say display flex. Now they're side by side, and we're gonna say grow 1. And we want this to be row. So Adam right, we want to be in the first container. And in the second container, we're going to say social icon. And we'll go ahead and add WordPress icon. All right. And we can then click add an address. I'll just put my website in there. All right, so now we have our content in there. We do need to adjust this a little bit actually. So the container that is holding these two, I'm gonna undo that grow. It's actually not necessary as much for this layout in order for them to be consistent. And what we're gonna do is we want to align these items to be the same, right? So you can see my name and the icon are just not centered. But if we come to the outer container that's holding those, we say align items center. Now, boom, perfect, they're lined up. So we need to then add some column gap. We'll say 20 pixels and say we actually want this icon to be always justified on the right hand of this container. So we'll click this container, say display flex, and we'll say justified content on the right. And now that's not working at the moment because we need to choose our container and actually set that to grow. So earlier I had placed the grow in the wrong position. All right, so now you can see we've got the name, we've got the icon. Okay, so that's just kind of an example of how to utilize Flex, right? So we inserted 2 more additional containers in another container, right? Because what we needed to do was control these 2 individually from the outside one, so this item wasn't affected. So it kind of creates a lot of nested containers here. Keep in mind, you can always come down, choose a container, come down to advanced, and create a block label. So we could say name and icon, and then this one we can say name. This container we can say icon, and so on and so forth to get the idea, so that it just helps with a little bit of organization on the back end. All right, so appreciate you following along with me there. I was a little bit all over the place, I'll be honest. But I just really wanted to just show some random tidbits of using Flex and how you can really achieve different kinds of layouts. So in the future, I'll consider creating a full actual design utilizing Flex. So subscribe to my channel and keep an eye out for any future videos. Appreciate your support.